I want to start a series of videos where I talk about each individual uh, leader of the Portuguese political parties, at least those that are in parliament and that have been in parliament for 44 years, almost 45 years, because next week we'll have the celebration of the 45th year of the Portuguese Republic. It was formed after the military coup in 1974, the 25th of April of 1974. And these political parties have been in power one way or another, and they almost always push for socialism or communism. We have never had anything else in Portugal, and that's why I keep repeating myself, but that's why we are so poor, that's why we are so miserable, and that's why at this point in time we are being, countries in Europe that previously were poorer and more miserable than Portugal are now catching up and actually surpassing Portugal. So the socialists and the communists have pushed for the exact same policies for almost 45 years, and Portugal has never improved. I'm actually going to start with the current president of our republic. He is not the leader of a party right now, but he was. He was the leader of the Social Democrats, so a center-left party in Portugal, which, when in power, they basically apply socialism anyway. They just do it more moderately than the typical socialists would do. The Socialist Party in Portugal is essentially left. They are not center-left, they are not far-left, although they are pending more toward the far left than the center. But they essentially are the left, just straight left. They apply socialism as quick as possible. The center-left party is slower in applying socialism. And this guy, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, which is the current president, he was the leader of that party, although politically he was never very successful. In fact, he was quite incompetent. He never did anything noteworthy. And the only reason why he was elected president was because for, I think, 10 years, or nearly 10 years, he was a public TV figure. He did political commentaries on the TV, and he got popular enough that that portion of his, let's say, show actually started encompassing suggestions that he would make for people to read certain books or the books that he was reading at the time. So, for 10 years, he essentially became a political commentator, but also we started expanding that concept into something else. And people started noticing him, he became popular, and that's the only reason why he is the president of the republic, which is actually quite funny when you remember that he visited the United States not long ago, and when he was with Trump made a joke about Cristiano Ronaldo, who is a famous Portuguese soccer player, and he said that Ronaldo is so popular that one day he will probably be the president of Portugal. And Marcelo replied to Trump that, oh no, Portugal is not the United States. And that was a clear thorn, let's say, thrown at Trump, because Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa was trying to say that, oh, the Portuguese people, they don't vote for people that are popular on TV or on, that they are in show business or something like that, when that's exactly the reason why he himself, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, was elected. So he's just an hypocrite, just like any other politician in Portugal. And actually, he goes beyond that. But I'm going to stick with what he has done specifically since he was elected in 2016. One of the functions of the president in Portugal, you have to understand that Portugal's president, he has not many powers. He does have what they usually call the atomic bomb, which is to fire the government. He has that power. And not much more than that, actually. The president has to oversee the laws that are passed in parliament, because he needs to uphold the constitution. That is essentially his main function in Portugal. And so every law that is passed in parliament has to go through the president. But here's the catch. He, as the president, he can veto a law and send it back to the parliament so that the deputies in parliament actually reform that law so that it is no longer possible for the president to veto it. But that is just, I would say, fluff. Because when the president sends the law back to parliament, parliament can simply send the law just as it is, without any changes, back to the president, and he is forced to approve it. He cannot veto it more than once. Which I think already shows just how ridiculous the Portuguese system is. I mean, the president has the power to veto the law and to uphold the constitution, but he can only do it once. So it almost means like the constitution can be a barrier for certain laws, but only once. The second time around, it is no longer a barrier. And this president actually went as far as not even vetoing clearly unconstitutional laws. He just passed them without any problems when they were clearly against a certain principle in our constitution, and that principle is the equality principle. The equality principle in our constitution means that no one can be discriminated against by means of their gender, by means of their social or economical status, by means of their race, by means of their ethnicity, by means of their religion. I mean, as you can see, this is an attempt to make sure that no one is discriminated against based on anything that identifies them, basically. But this president has passed, he has done more than this, but I'm going to focus on two which just show what I've been saying in other videos, which is essentially that the public servants are a privileged group of people in Portugal. They have all the benefits, they can't be fired, they can't, although there is nothing in laws or even the constitution that say that they can be fired, but it is interpreted that way because they are a clientele of the government. And if the government gives them all sorts of benefits, then they will get their votes, the public servant votes. And they are nearly 1 million people directly and indirectly being paid by the state. And so they are, one way or another, public servants. And so one of the measures that the president passed, without clearly being unconstitutional, but they were still, that law was still passed by the president without even suffering the scrutiny of the Constitutional Court. We have a court that analyzes the Constitution, supposedly, although they are quite controlled by the politicians, so it's not always the case, but they analyze the Constitution and make sure that certain laws, or the laws that get to them, to their queue of analysis, let's say, is put through the lenses of the Constitution, and if it's against the Constitution, then it will be failed. The law will not pass. If it's okay with the Constitution, then it's okay, it will pass. But the president did no such thing. He simply passed a law that said that public servants will now only work for 35 hours a week. Everyone else in the country has to work for 40 hours a week, minimum, but the public servants now have 35. This immediately had an increase in expense. And this is one of the things where this president, this absolute useful idiot, which is what he is, an idiot not in the sense that he doesn't know what he's doing. He knows perfectly well what he is doing. He supports this regime, and he supports this government in ways that we have never seen before, because he tries to cover for this government in every way. And I already talked about one of those instances in the tragic fires of 2017. And he covers for them in every way. And when we see that he only works for the same clienteles that the government works for, our regime, which is already quite corrupt, as I explained in previous videos, it gets even worse, because even the highest figure of the state is completely, moving in the same paths, in the same corrupt swamp, let's say, taking as an example the swamp that I keep hearing about in the United States political system. So he moves in the same swamp that all the other Portuguese politicians move. It's the corruption, and it's the governing based on ideology and clientele's sort of swamp. It's not about governing the country and making things better for everyone. It's only making things better for a small set of people that benefit or give votes to the parties in power.